She tried to teach me those things, and she tried to teach me that this land that we were going to is one of very few places across the world where you could come with nothing but end up with something if you just worked hard enough. She left out the part about it's good to know people too. In fact, in our world, you gotta know people, because all of us know people who work very hard and get nowhere. And I think many of us know people who don't work very hard to get somewhere because they know the right people. So we don't live in a world where we always reward the hardest working, the smartest. We live in a world where we reward the hardest, the hardest working, the smartest, who get an opportunity. It's about opportunity. And sometimes opportunity is a matter of luck. Being in the right place at the right time. She didn't teach me those things. She learned those things the hard way. Okay? But she tried to teach me some very positive things about the United States of America as we were flying to Los Angeles from Vietnam. To give me hope, to give herself hope. But as soon as we land into Los Angeles, as soon as we land into LAX, step off the plane and step into the building there, as soon as we step in that first corridor, people there are throwing things at me and my mom. People there are spitting on us as we walk by. People there are yelling horrible words at us as we pass by. I couldn't understand English at the time, but I knew these were not good words by the way people were yelling them at us. My mom, I remember, put her arms around me. All 4'11", 95 pounds of her. 26-year-old young woman, trying to protect her son from the things that people were throwing at us. As we walk along the corridor, sometimes the pelting became harder and harder, and she would squeeze tighter and tighter. And sometimes she would squeeze so tight that it would hurt. And on those occasions, I would look up and I'd want to say something to my mom, but I never did. Because every time I looked up, all I saw was tears rolling down her face. And even as a little 5-year-old, I knew I should be silent at the time. We weren't treated very well when we first arrived here. My mom thought she had brought us to a better place. And invariably, the United States is a much better place along many dimensions. But at that particular moment in time, for us, the United States was not a better place. Because at least in Vietnam, we had our family to go to. But you have to understand the context in which this was all happening. We didn't even treat our Vietnam veterans well when they returned home. And imagine if we didn't treat our veterans well when they returned home, imagine what it might be like to actually be Vietnamese. And you can start to imagine some of the things that we faced as we came here and were the outsiders. I grew up in some very tough neighborhoods. I'd often get bloodied and beaten in fights I got into at school, and in my school we had to fight back, or it got worse for you. On school days, my mom would look outside our second-story apartment window to make sure that I would be coming home. Because sometimes in my neighborhood, kids didn't come home. Ever. And on those days I'd gotten into a fight and got all bloody. As soon as she would see the blood on me, she'd run down our apartment stairs and come meet me in the street, put her arms around me. Like I was 5 years old again at that airport. Tears streaming down her face. She thought she had brought us to this better place. To make a long story short, the guy that my mom married, my stepfather, I was never really close to him. We didn't have much in common, so I wasn't real close to him. But my stepfather, he got really close to my little sister. In 1984, my stepfather was convicted of raping my little sister. And because of that and the way she was treated as a biracial child in school, half white, half Vietnamese, she ran away from home with a friend of hers in 1985. In the summer of 1985, 1 month after my sister and her friend ran away, my mom gets a phone call from a detective in the King County Sheriff's Department, Seattle, Washington. The detective says to my mom, "Mrs. Robbins, we found the other girl that your daughter ran away with. But she'd been sexually assaulted and bludgeoned to death." As soon as he says that, my mom frantically asks, "What about my daughter? What about Diane? What do you know about her?" And all the detective could say was, We don't know. We don't have any leads to follow. We don't know. There is no evidence of your daughter. We don't know. There are no witnesses. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know. All he could say over and over and over again is, we don't know. That was 1985. It's almost 2012 now. And we still don't know. Have you ever heard of the Green River Killer? My sister is believed to be one of his victims. As you might imagine, after that phone call, life isn't so great for me and my mom. But it's especially bad for my mom. Because you're not supposed to outlive your children, are you? My mom goes into this deep depression, in and out of this deep depression. There are not many days where there are smiles on her face. There are not many days where she's laughing. Not many days where she is hugging other people. She's in this deep depression. And this went on for years. But there came a time, at least temporarily, when she wasn't in that depression and when she was very happy. 6 years after that phone call, I get married to my wife Donna out in Michigan. And for a whole week, my mom is happy. She flies out to Michigan for this week-long wedding celebration, and she's laughing at people's jokes. She's hugging other people. There are smiles lighting up her face. It brings great joy to my heart. But as you and I know, all good things must come to an end, right? The wedding celebration ends. We pack up. We go our separate ways. My mom flies back home to Washington State, where she's living at the time. Goes back into depression. A few months later, I began graduate school at Michigan State University. I would talk to my mom every week, share with each other the week's events. And in the middle of my first semester there, late October, I'm talking to my mom on the phone. We're sharing with each other the week's events. And as we're about to close, before we hang up, my mom says to me, she says, Lam. And I know my mom is serious when she uses my Vietnamese name. She says, Lam, you have Donna to take care of you now. And we hang up. A week later, I get a phone call from Washington State, expecting it to be my mom, but it's not. It's a detective from the Benton County Sheriff's Department where my mom was living. The detective says to me, Mr. Robbins, we have some unfortunate news. We just found your mom, and she had hung herself in the shower. 1 week after my mom says to me, you have Donna to take care of you now, my mom commits suicide. I think what she thought was her work was done, and she had nothing else to live for because of the many tragedies she faced here. And now she was treated as an outsider, as an immigrant. Up to the point of my mom's suicide, I hated being Asian. I hated what I looked like. I hated myself. Why? Because I internalized and believed all the negative messages told about the people that I come from. I believed those messages and words to be true, and I started to hate myself. I hate my own people. In the world of race studies, we call that internalized racial oppression. You start to hate the people you come from because you believe all the bad stuff told about the people you come from. The gender equivalent of that is when we tell young women what they're supposed to look like through various media messages, and when some young women can't achieve that look, they start to hate themselves. Do not underestimate the power of words and messages to tear people down. But do not also underestimate the power of words and messages to lift people up. Unfortunately, it took my mom's suicide to break me out of that funk of hating myself and to remind me of all the good things that my mom was trying to teach me about our culture as I was growing up.